Hi all. A few pieces of advice for your Macbeth project. First piece of advice for part one. Let's talk about part one first. Make sure that you understand your monologue. Make sure that you go through the steps to create meaning in your head. On the document for the part one assignment, I've encouraged you to paraphrase the monologue. So put it in your own words. Use a dictionary, look up words you don't know, and then paraphrase that monologue. Don't read your paraphrase. Don't record the paraphrase. When you perform your monologue, read Shakespeare's words. But paraphrasing that monologue is going to help you create understanding so you get what that monologue means. So that's your first step. Make sure you understand what Shakespeare's words mean. Lines that confuse you, send me an email. I can help out. For part one, don't use sources. No reason to use any sources. Use your head. That said, if you do use sources, make sure you cite them. Every year I have a couple students who end up using a source, they read word for word from a source, and they don't cite it. Whether you are writing it or speaking it, if you use words from a source and you don't cite it, that is plagiarism. Because you are using words and ideas from a source and you're not giving credit to that source, you're trying to pass those words and ideas off as your own. That is plagiarism. Please don't be guilty of plagiarism. I encourage you not to use a source for part one. If you do use a source, cite it. And remember, this is a 200 level college course. Do not use a cheat source to help you understand your monologue. Just reach out to me if you need some help understanding it, okay? For part two, you are going to be citing sources. And I want to remind you about a few citation rules. I'm going to show you a document here that you have in your folders. You've had this document since 1205, so that you have this in your folders, integrating literary quotations. Remember the importance of introducing all direct quotes. You introduce the direct quote with a signal phrase, whether you state the author in the signal phrase or you state the character who is speaking, depending on what kind of source you're using. If you're citing the play, you're going to use the character Macbeth says, Lady Macbeth says. If you're citing maybe that documentary, Ethan Hawke says, the PBS documentary reports, maybe if you're using the source in the back, Susan Snyder reports or says, make sure you use a signal phrase introducing your direct quote. If I scroll down here, avoiding shifts in tense, this is poetry. We don't have to worry about shifting verb tense with a direct quote when we are quoting poetry. So I guess just a reminder, when you are summarizing the play, make sure to use present tense, but you won't need to change verb tenses. The last page is the page that's most useful here. On the last page, there's a reminder about citing poetry. This is poetry. So we are going to have to use this little slash guy with a space on either side. If you do end up citing more than one line of Macbeth, not all of you will end up citing the play. Some of you will only cite those critical analyses, and that's great. If you do end up citing the play, remember that you need to use the slash if you cite more than one line. And also down here tells us how to cite a play. So yeah, it's poetry, but it's also a play. The Purdue Owl isn't very good. It doesn't give us this information, so you'll have to look here to find it. Everything is the same about citing a play. You've got your signal phrase, direct quotes around anything quoted word for word. Of course, we'll use our little slashy in between lines. This is what's different though. At the end, you're not going to put a page number at the end for a play. Instead, you're going to put the act, the scene, and the line numbers with periods, no spaces, just periods separating them. So this direct quote happens to be 2 lines. If you quote 1 line, you'll have just 1 number right here at the end. If you quote 4 lines, you'll have a 4-line range. But act, scene, and line number for quoting your play. Not all of you will quote Macbeth directly. Like I said, a lot of you will only use the critical analyses, and that's great. But if you do quote the play, make sure you get it right. Keeping in mind rules about citing poetry, read this part, make sure you refresh your memory, and rules about citing a play. All right, last thoughts. This is not a writing course, right? So you are not writing a full essay. For part 2, each of those choices do ask you to write a couple paragraphs, but it's just a couple paragraphs. So you do not write a whole essay, right? you're going to feel like, oh my gosh, I need an introductory paragraph. I need a concluding paragraph. We're not writing a whole essay. You just need 1 or 2 paragraphs. No introduction, no conclusion. You will need a works cited page. And so you will have to put that works cited entry on the bottom after your 2 paragraphs, including only the sources that you've cited. If you need some reminders or some help with figuring out how to write the works cited page for some of your sources, reach out to me. Like if you're using the Susan Snyder piece, this is an anthology. Make sure you use the format for an anthology to do that. If you're using that PBS, that's an online source, so use an online source. Reach out with questions, but you will have a works cited at the end. No introduction, no conclusion, though it's not a whole essay. Reach out with questions, shoot me emails, shoot me Snapchats, maybe share your stuff with me on Google, and we can work on it that way. Thanks for watching. Toodaloo.